Hello, art teachers. Today I'm going to demonstrate how to sew a six-sided cube filled with stuffing. When I teach sewing to fifth graders, they can choose any three-dimensional shape they want. They need to design their own pattern, figure out how many pieces they need, and sew it together. This cube is one of my examples that many of them choose. I have other videos that demonstrate some of my other samples. Many of the boys want to sew this because I start the class by throwing it at them, and the idea of making a toy that you can throw is very appealing. You can make your cube any size. I made mine 3 by 3. Usually my samples are about 4 by 4, but I made this one a little bit smaller just so I could do it quickly for the camera. Any smaller than this will probably be too fiddly. It has to be a perfect square. This may be obvious to you, but many of my fifth graders don't believe it. They want to freehand it or sort of wing it, and if it is not a perfect square, they are not going to be able to make a cube. Felt is really easy to trace on. You can use any kind of markers, a lot of softer pencils will work, and if there are any pen lines showing when they sew, we'll just put those on the inside. You are definitely going to need some good shears to cut your fabric. If you're trying to use dull scissors or student scissors, it's just going to chew up the fabric and be frustrating for everyone. You don't necessarily need a pair for every student, though. A dozen pair will be fine for your class. I actually get these really cheaply, just for about $1 a pair. Because I'm at home, I'm going to use my smaller pair that I prefer. Felt is very easy to cut, and that's one of the nice things that makes it perfect for sewing in school. You need 6 squares. I always encourage them to get everything cut before they start. I'm using a steel tapestry needle. It's very important that it is a sharp needle. And I'm using some pearl cotton. I'm using black so it shows up well in the video, but it comes in all colors. I have other videos that explain what materials I use and why. To thread the needle, I'm going to use a single strand, not double, and I'm going to tie my knot right there. The knot goes on the end, it never goes on the needle. I don't really need pins for something so small, but your students probably will. I like to help them pin and do one piece at a time. Pin goes in and out just like that. When we start, we're going to put the needle in between so that we've got the needle on the inside. I'm going to pull this all the way through. That knot will stop it. And we're going to do the whip stitch. And the whip stitch always starts from the same side. In this case, I am doing it from the bottom. Once you get to the point where the pin is, you can take that out. This demonstrates about the size of the stitches you want and about the distance that you want them to be. If they make their stitches too big, which sometimes they will want to do, it will fall apart and the stuffing will fall apart. If they make it too small, it will just take too many classes. This should be easily done in maybe about an hour. So for my classes, which are 50 minutes, it usually takes them about a class and a half if they get started right away. So that is our first piece. I'm going to leave my thread in there, although you could easily clip it off at this point. I'm going to put one piece in here. So this can get kind of confusing for the students if it's the first thing they've sewn, so I usually help them with the pinning of this one. Okay. I go from the yellow and purple, and I just switch right over to the purple and green. Sometimes you have to help the thread a little bit go in the right place. The reason you need a sharp needle for felt is because felt is a non-woven fabric. There are no holes in the felt, so a blunt needle is okay if you already have holes in the fabric with a loosely woven fabric like burlap or needlepoint cloth. But for a tightly woven fabric or a non-woven fabric, you have to punch the hole. Now, I've gotten to the end here, but I actually want to sew up here. I want to move my thread. There's a couple things you can do here. The one I prefer is tacking. And you notice how I kept moving forward with my stitches here. But to do the tacking, I'm going to sew 1, 2, 3 times in the same spot. Put my needle inside. And trim it. And that will make a nice secure knot. Now you can see I've got 2 seams. I'm going to sew together this seam. Again, I'm going to go inside underneath. Put that knot down there. Most of my students have been doing needlework with me for several years before we get to 5th grade sewing. So most of them can already pull the needle in a very basic way. Some of them are really good. But of course, I always have some students that are new. But I have found even brand new 5th graders can handle felt sewing pretty easily. The needle and thread and the fabric are all very easy to work with and very forgiving. Okay, I've gotten to another intersection that I can just leave my needle on there without cutting it. I like to encourage them to use different colors because it makes it really easy to see the construction. Okay, line it up neatly there. The more neatly you line up your fabric before you stitch, the better it's going to come out. My stitches are not quite as regular as they would normally be because I'm trying to look at the monitor and my hands at the same time so that I stitch in the field. But my stitches are going a little bit deeper there than I really need to be. I think they're the right space, but they don't need to be that deep. But I'm a little distracted by looking at the monitor. I'm going to do my tacking stitch here. And I always like to end with my threads on the inside. As long as they're on the inside, you don't have to cut them short. You can leave them long, because if they cut them short, they're going to be more prone to come apart. You can see I've got 4 of my sides on there. When I made the knot before, I did it slowly so that you could see it. Knotting is one of the things that the students really tend to have trouble with. That is not how I actually make a knot. I make a knot like this, and then I roll it off my finger and slide it down. So that is much quicker. But of course, this all depends on how well you yourself sew and how long you've been teaching them. Now, I had been demonstrating this stitch by starting at the bottom and going to the top. The whip stitch doesn't make any difference at all. You can just as easily stitch downward. Of course, I'm doing it sort of strangely because I'm holding it for the camera here, But I find that I switch back and forth between going into the top and going into the bottom pretty interchangeably, depending on how I'm sitting and what I'm holding. In this case, it's a little backwards for me. You could show your students what you think is going to work best for them. But really, people sort of sit in all sorts of different positions. They hold their needles in different ways. They get into a rhythm of stitching differently. Whatever works for them is fine. The only thing you want to monitor is that they're not making huge stitches or tiny stitches. All right, next we're going to go with our gray. You can see this, the measurement may not exactly line up, but felt is so forgiving. You can just sort of fudge it. You also want to make sure that they don't pull it too tight so they don't bunch it up. Okay, I've got a knot there. This is going to happen. You're going to get knots. One thing you can do is sort of stick your needle into one of the loops. Pull on it. Sometimes that works out. If it doesn't, you can always just clip it and pull out any bad stitches. Pulling stitches out is a completely normal part of stitching, just like erasing is a normal part of drawing. So don't let your students get frustrated. I'm going to come around this way. I'm going to stop using pins just to speed it up for me. But I do want to make sure that that is all straight. If they totally botch their first attempt, that is okay. Don't we all? It is easy to pull those stitches right out, either with just your fingers, the tip of the needle, or a seam ripper. I have another video that goes over all the tools you might want to have. Now at this point, you want to be careful that they're sewing the correct seams together, that they don't accidentally sew the wrong thing together. Now that it's getting bigger, I'm going to do my tacking. It's almost a box. If you do a bigger box, the only difference is that it's going to take longer to stitch. I really wouldn't recommend doing anything smaller than this, because if it's too small, it's just hard for them to see what they're doing and hard for them to hold it in their hand. But a 4x4 box or 5x5 is good too. I have had many the 5th grade student who has decided to do a box too late, or has spent so much time fooling around cutting out the square, not getting it right and having to start over, or cutting non-straight squares, that the project ends and they have not finished because they have only got 3 seams sewn up. You got to keep them with their nose to the grindstone because there are a lot of seams on this. But this needle and thread is really cheap, so sometimes I send my students home with a needle and thread to finish up at home. All right, so this top piece is going to be a little tricky and something you're definitely going to want to help them pin. Just going to do 1 pin on each side. I backed off a little so you could see a little better. Felt is great because it's not slippery and it's easy to hold in your hand. And it's got a little stretch to it too. Okay, so now I've got this top to finish off. I'm going to do as best I can getting those corners sharp and all matched up. You can see I'm getting to the end of my thread here. You always want to make sure you have at least enough thread to get to the end of your row, the end of your seam, because it just is messy if you have to change. Gets messy if you have to change your thread in the middle of a seam. But I barely have enough there. Many times students want to estimate how much thread they're going to need for their whole project, and they try to put all that thread on their needle at once. And of course, that's just a recipe for knots. The length you want is about the length of your arm from your hand to your shoulder. Doubled over, that's going to be half the length, and that's going to be enough for you to pull the stitches through easily. If you get more than that, then you're just going to have a big knotted mess. And if you get less than that, you're going to have to be refilling your needle all the time. You can see even my stitches are not all that nice, but I'm going fast. At this level, I'm not worried too much about beauty. What I am concerned about is them understanding construction, about how pieces fit together and how you can visualize that before you start working. And you can check as you go to make sure that whatever you're constructing is going to work together. See, that purple is a little too short. I'm just going to stretch it a little. I want them to have the satisfaction of making something that is three-dimensional and is a toy or something useful they can play with. All right. Kind of a ugly, awkward little corner there. So I can go maybe even through that yellow one I had done before, just to anchor everything down. Those really are frightful stitches. Okay, one more. Taking you through 11 seams. That's why the cube is more of a challenge, because it has 6 pieces and 12 seams. Whereas the purse or the heart are fewer seams and fewer pieces. So notice now that I have my square, I have left an opening. There we go. You can stuff this with polyester fiber fill from the fabric store, or you can stuff this with the insides of a pillow from Walmart for about 1/3 the cost. It is the same stuff, but for some reason when you buy it in a pillow, it is a fraction of the cost. But you could also use fabric scraps, tissue paper, toilet paper, but you know, one $6 pillow will last for the entire 5th grade, so that's what I use. And you want to get it nice and tight. Just really get all in there, get all your corners. Because sometimes they don't put enough in, they get it all sewn up, and then they're like, oh man, I wish I had put more in there. Go ahead and stuff it tight. Now, we got one more seam. Coming right up to the end here. This last one, I'm going to tack. Pull it tight. 1, 2, 3, and I don't want to cut it off there because I don't want the string sticking out. I'm going to run it back all the way through, just have it come out some other place, clip it off, and there you go. And now the next thing you're going to do is to tell your 5th graders to stop throwing that in my class. If you need more information, I have many more videos on all 6 years of my needlework curriculum. I have one on the tools, materials that you're going to need, and I have a number of different sewing demos that show my different stitches and projects. This is Heidi Howe, and go teach those kids to stitch.